really made.
Hey, it's FYF Sports, man. It's Lamont. We back with another podcast video. I got a lot of information for you guys today. I just got an interesting take on what's kind of been going on in the NBA, primarily about James Harden and the Houston Rockets. Just a crazy situation over there when we see the monster trade with Westbrook and John Wall. But I just wanted to dive in deep on that, really give you guys another perspective on it, what I think's going on with the Houston Rockets and what they should do moving forward in the future if this new superstar pairing does not work out. Before we get started today, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell if you haven't done so already. We are grinding. We are almost to 20K subscribers. We're inching along to 17K subscribers right now. Appreciate all of the support. Appreciate you guys liking, commenting, sharing the videos. Appreciate all the donations that are poured in to support the channel. The growth of this channel since we started in June has been absolutely crazy. It's not something that I predicted. I don't think anybody really could have predicted the rise of FYF Sports, but you know what? It's just giving us more motivation to continue to grind, keep posting videos, keep trying to find new ways to make the content better. And then, always at the end of the day, just bring you real news, expose fake news, and then give you just some of the best basketball debates that you've ever seen on YouTube, especially when you chime into our live chats. We try to go live every day at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Some days we can't go live, just kind of due to scheduling conflicts. But whenever we do go live, it's usually epic, and we usually have some great topics on board to discuss. So make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you hit that notification bell so when we do go live, you don't miss out on it. Appreciate everybody that watches from Facebook, from the website, from Spotify and Apple. Again, all of those views, all of the support helps. And it helps make this channel grow. So appreciate to all the subscribers. But today I wanted to talk about James Harden and the Houston Rockets. As we all know, the Houston Rockets just traded former MVP Russell Westbrook for John Wall of the Washington Wizards. And I think this was a very intriguing trade because obviously, Russell Westbrook, for as good as he is, with regards to shooting efficiency, he ranks dead last in the NBA. And I think if you're looking to build a championship team, your superstar player, the guy that takes the most shots, cannot be that inefficient. I think that's a big detriment, especially from the mid-range. A guy who can't space the floor, he's limited offensively, although he's still great in his own right. So although Westbrook has his own flaws, John Wall also presents his own issues as well, coming off of the Achilles and ACL tear back to back. He, in his own right, was similar to Russell Westbrook. Not a very strong mid-range shooter, not a very good three-point shooter. They're both great at attacking the basket, but they are both ball-dominant guards that need the ball in their hands to be effective. So it's going to just be curious how this trade works out. There are rumors circulating out there that this is who James Harden preferred. They say James Harden preferred to have a John Wall on this roster as opposed to a Russell Westbrook. But it's hard to even say if those reports are factual because based on what's coming out of Houston right now, they're saying that James Harden has been radio silent. He didn't show up to the team's first individual workouts. That's not something to really raise your eyebrow. That happens with a lot of the stars in the NBA. A lot of the stars in the NBA miss the first, second, and third days of training camp for whatever reasons. A lot of times it's excused. Not like I said, so until these details come out with regards to James Harden, and I know them for fact, I don't want to really play into that and allow that to kind of sway how I feel about what I'm going to be talking about today. But it is something to keep your eye on. So you want to keep your eye on that. It looks as if the Houston Rockets are trying to do everything they can to make James Harden happy. But that's something that's been consistent with this Houston Rocket team ever since James Harden has gotten to the Rockets. Ever since he's gotten to the Rockets have went above and beyond to create a roster and create a team that James Harden is happy with. And unfortunately, that still hasn't amounted. That has not amounted to winning basketball, or at least with regards to winning championships. They found a lot of success in the regular season. They found some success in the playoffs. But with regards to winning championships, which is that's the ultimate goal, they fell short time and time again. Most recently last year, getting put out by the Los Angeles Lakers, a team that went on to actually win the championship. So they failed to get over the hump, even though they've had a large number of superstar players on that roster. Great coaches in that organization, a great front office. They still have not found a way to put it all together to become a championship team. And I wanted to talk about it from the aspect of when we look at the large volume of superstar players that James Harden has played with in the past. All right, so we know he started his career in OKC. He started his career at OKC playing alongside Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. He was a sixth man on that team, and he thrived in that particular role. Now, when OKC failed to pay him, when they failed to, agree to a contract of a few extra million just to keep him on that roster, James Harden then looked to sign elsewhere. He ended up signing with the Houston Rockets, where he kind of exploded onto the scene as a superstar of the league and kind of surprised everybody. But, in this particular era, in this day and time, we all know that it's going to be extremely difficult to win with one star player. So the Rockets immediately sought out bringing in superstar talent to surround this guy with. The first star that they bring in is Dwight Howard. They signed this guy out of free agency from Los Angeles Lakers, and on paper it looked as if it could be a great pairing. I mean, you have a dominant big, one of the most dominant bigs of this particular generation. You put that with James Harden. I mean, you got great role players on that team as well, guys like Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell, and you would hope that would be enough to get you over the hump. But with Dwight Howard's multiple back injuries and just inconsistency, not just from the bench, but just James Harden himself in the playoffs, that team never was able to get over the hump. It ended with a very messy feud between Dwight Howard and James Harden, where it was reported that both of those guys had went to management asking if they could trade the other player. So again, it just became messy in the end. No one really knows the true or accurate story. But what we do know is that the Houston Rockets sided with their star player, James Harden, and they got Dwight Howard up out of there. So when obviously not bringing Dwight Howard back, you have to bring in another superstar. So the Rockets, mortgaged everything. They mortgaged everything, and they make a massive trade to the Clippers. For superstar point guard Chris Paul. And when you make that trade, obviously, you don't just make that trade not just to be average. You make that trade to win championships, and it started off. It started off great. This team was one of the only teams to take that dynasty Golden State Warrior team to 7 games. They came extremely close to putting that team out, and then unfortunately, Chris Paul goes down with a hamstring injury in 2018, Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. Well, we all know what happens. The Golden State Warriors pull away with the win after the Houston Rockets throw up 27 three-point shots, miss all of them, and find themselves bounced out of the playoffs with no real floor general on the court. And then again, that right there, and it seems like losses fuel the fire in a lot of these problems that we see going on with the Houston Rockets, because after that loss, contentions grew, and then we hear reports that Chris Paul requested a trade, which Chris Paul came out and said that wasn't true. Then it was reports that came out that James Harden gave the Houston Rockets an ultimatum, said it's either me or him. You got to choose one. And this is the second time the Houston Rockets sided. The second instance where the Houston Rockets sided with James Harden, and they ended up trading Chris Paul, getting Chris Paul up out of there. So now this is you fail with two superstar players. The organization now has agreed to trade Chris Paul out to bring in another superstar player in Russell Westbrook. So they make a massive trade for Russell Westbrook, also mortgaging more of their future, 2 first-round picks, as sending Chris Paul to OKC, bringing in Russell Westbrook. All right, now again, on paper the roster looks great. All right, and even if we look back on the 2019 season, the season was going along great. The Rockets were one of the more efficient teams. Russell Westbrook was having one of his best years. Mike D'Antoni and that organization had went with the analytics. They traded Clint Capella, and they were playing small ball. They bring in Robert Covington, and the Rockets look like a force to reckon with, even in the NBA playoff bubble. Defensively, the Rockets look long, they look fast. They were the number 1 rated team going into the playoffs. A lot of people had this team potentially beating the Los Angeles Lakers the way they were playing. All right, but in a 7-game series against some of these great teams, especially the Lakers, they just simply got exposed. They did not have the size and speed to compete. Injuries to Eric Gordon and just a lack of depth on that team kind of caught up with them, and it just didn't work out in the Russell Westbrook era. I mean, and you're talking about a MVP in Russell Westbrook who averaged 27, 7, and 7. All right, but they again another exit in the playoffs fuels the fire, fuels the tension amongst the team, and now we find ourselves in another situation where rumors are surrounding this team, and now we have 2 superstar players that have been rumored to say they both want to trade out of the Rockets. James Harden was reported to have wanted to trade to the Nets, which Kevin Durant came out and said that was false. But then you have Russell Westbrook, where it was reported that he came to the team and said he wanted to be traded out of the organization as well. So again, losses in the playoffs bred more contention, and then the Rockets find themselves in another peculiar situation, trying to determine what do we do. Do we trade both? Do we trade one or the other? And again, they sided with James Harden. They said they want to try to work it out, and they end up trading Russell Westbrook for often injured John Wall, because as reportedly stated, James Harden would prefer to play with the John Wall. I'm not particularly sure how that's going to work or how Steven Silas can make that happen. But again, he has problems on his hands, and he has major problems on his hands. He's dealing with often disgruntled superstar player that finds he finds problems or fault in any superstar player that he plays with. Because as soon as Chris Paul left, he had major success in OKC, taking a team in the Oklahoma City Thunder to the playoffs, and that same team almost put the Houston Rockets out of the playoffs, taking them to 7 games. So again, is the problem all of these other superstar players? Was it Dwight Howard? Was it Chris Paul? Was it Russell Westbrook? Is the blame gonna fall on John Wall if this doesn't work out again? But we're talking about he's on his 4th superstar pairing, and he's still on the Rockets. I think it's going to come to a point where the Rockets will need to say, you know what? Out of all the changes we've made, out of all the players that we brought in and out of this organization, and we still haven't had success, the only thing that remains consistent in these losing patterns that we have is James Harden. He's the consistent piece in all of these epic failures. We can point to multiple incidents where in the playoffs he's came up small in the 4th quarter. In that Game 7 in 2018 against the Golden State Warriors, we can easily talk about how he was not able to lead that team and prevent them from chucking up, a record number of 3-point shots which ultimately cost them the game. And again, we know that this is their style of play, but they were missing all of those shots. And we're talking about, you're talking about a series in game 6 and 7, they had double-digit leads. You know, even in that game 7, where they were chucking up all of these threes, they had a double-digit lead. And they can't hold on. And they give that lead up, and they find themselves bounced out of the playoffs again. Again, when we talk about this Houston Rocket team, we talk about all of the players coming in out of this organization. The one thing that remains consistent has been James Harden. All right. And so now we have to really look at James Harden the same way I talk about Carmelo Anthony. You haven't won anything. You're going on 10 years in your career. You've had some great individual seasons. You know, statistically, when we're talking about the individual side of basketball, you're offensively unstoppable. No one can stop that step back. He draws a high number of fouls. He's very creative when he drives. He knows how to use his physicality. He's gotten better on defense, at least giving effort on the perimeter. And he's one of the better post defenders in the NBA. I mean, individually, James Harden has definitely shown himself to be elite. But as a team player, he's shown himself to be a complete bum, because the Rockets have given him a number of winning scenarios in which he has failed. And now it just looks even worse, because we see a guy like Chris Paul, when he leaves, ultimate success, third in the MVP voting, bringing a team to the playoffs that had no business being there. Dwight Howard goes to the Lakers. They end up winning the championship. All right. We have Kevin Durant, who moved on. We have Kevin Durant when he left OKC. He's now a lot of his teammates now are finding success. All right. The ultimate indictment on James Harden will be this. If Russell Westbrook has ultimate success in Washington this year, if he can get that team along with Bradley Beal to play great in that Eastern Conference, if they can they don't even have to win a championship. If they can make a strong playoff run and be highly competitive in the East, I think that's all going to be an indictment on James Harden. All right, because multiple time and time again, we've seen all of these star players who've played with James Harden have a lot of success when they leave playing with James Harden. So I think the Houston Rockets need to be put on notice. I think they need to be put on notice. I think this year, if I'm in the Houston Rockets front office, this is the last year, and I'm giving James Harden one more year to prove himself. Because you got to think of what the Houston Rockets have sacrificed, not just to keep him on that team, but also to keep him happy. They've traded star players. They've let players leave. They've mortgaged their future. They've given up a high number of draft picks, all for James Harden, just to keep him happy. On top of the fact that they offered him $103 million 2-year extension, which will ultimately make him one of the highest paid players in the NBA ever, grossing over $50 million a season for 2 seasons in a row. And he turned that down. I mean, you're putting the Houston Rockets in a very peculiar situation. You're putting them in a very peculiar situation. And again, if I'm the Rockets, and this is my personal opinion, this is the last year. This is the last chance that James Harden's gotten. Because you got to think of what you've mortgaged and what you've put around them, and it still failed. And the only consistent piece, whether it's the coaching changes, I mean, there's been multiple coaches in there, from D'Antoni to Bickerstaff. I don't know what they can continue. I don't know what they can do going forward, but I think that if it doesn't work this year, you have to get rid of James Harden. As great as he is, as great as of a player as he is, as great as he is in that community, if you're looking to be a championship team, James Harden is sliding deeper and deeper into that same basket of players that I've put in Carmelo Anthony in. Great individually, but you can't win championships with these guys. All right. And at the NBA level, and one thing you'll learn, the higher level of basketball you begin to play, when the higher level of basketball you begin to play, one thing that you'll understand you will understand quickly is that it's extremely hard for one player to beat 5. It's extremely hard for one player to beat 5. And what I mean by that is everybody needs help. Jordan, one man, couldn't beat 5. Because individually, in the late 80s, Jordan was probably the best player in the league. Individually. But he couldn't beat the Pistons. He couldn't beat the Celtics. He couldn't beat the Bucks. One man will never beat 5 in the NBA. Not when you're talking about championship caliber teams. And so you have to, is James Harden a type of player? I mean, are you going to be able to bring in a coach that can convince him doing less is more? Are you going to bring in a coach that's going to accentuate and accelerate the roles of others around James Harden, giving them more confidence to do things so that this team isn't so heavily reliant on James Harden to score the ball and be the offensive juggernaut that he is? I mean, these are all questions to come, but I think that the coach there, Stephen Silas, is as innovative as he was in Dallas. He's the right coach for the job. He can figure it out. But again, I think with the injury history that John Wall has, I think the door is open for a lot of people to point the blame to John Wall if things go south. And I think that's the problem with making this trade, because you're trading for a guy that's been extremely damaged goods with regards to being an NBA caliber player, and I think you're just opening the door for James Harden to be even more disgruntled if they find themselves back in this situation next year, which I predicted they will be, with the early playoff exit with even more questions than answers. But I want you guys to let me know what you think about James Harden and the Houston Rockets. What do you think about this particular trade? What do you think the Rockets should do moving forward? If you are a Houston Rocket fan, what do you think they should do moving forward? Because the championship door is closing. You're talking about James Harden. He's 31 years old, going on 32. I mean, he maybe only has 2, maybe 3 years before before we start to see that downward turn. Not everybody is built like LeBron James. Not everybody's going to have that slow downward trajectory. Usually when you hit that 34, 35 age in the NBA, we see a sharp downturn in production. James Harden's going to have to figure it out very soon. But like I said, you guys, let me know what you think about this in the comments. I would love to hear from you. We obviously going to be talking about this in our live stream, because we really need some answers on what the Houston Rockets are doing by making this trade. What do they hope to get out of it? And with the new coach Silas there, he has a lot of work on his hands trying to figure out how to put not just a winning team onto the court, but a team that's going to keep James Harden happy, because it seems like every year we look up, he's disgruntled with something in the organization. Hey, it's FYF Sports, man. Been another great podcast episode. Again, like I said before, appreciate all of the support for the channel. We are continuing to build, continuing to grind. Got a lot of new things coming for the channel in 2021. We're going to be expanding the platform to audiobooks, to Apple Music, to Spotify. All of these platforms are going to now be opened up to FYF Sports, so make sure you stay tuned with everything that we have to come. But we appreciate the support thus far. We're going to continue to grind. Make sure you join our live streams, man. This is a topic right here. This would be a great topic for one of our live streams. So if you want to chop it up in the live stream about James Harden, if you're a Houston Rockets fan, if you disagree with my take, if you feel that these other guys were all the problems, make sure you hop in the live, you chop it up with us, and we can kind of go from there, just so we can kind of pick each other's brain. And if it comes down to a live debate, obviously the $25 cash app there is there for anybody who wants to take on the challenge. Hey, but it's FYF Sports, man. It's been another great podcast video, and we out.
Really late.